Love it.
Okay, recording. Okay, Dr. Olivia, welcome to the Biohacker Babes podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, I'm super excited to be here, Lauren, especially because, we obviously work together and we're in this mission together. So I'm super excited to bring what we know and what we're so passionate about to your listeners. Yeah.
Yes. So our audience has heard a lot about Pompa Program and Cell Detox, but I am very excited to go to the source. You're Dr. Pompa's daughter, and you did my training, a lot of it. You've really
Yeah. Yeah.
been a big source for me and an inspiration. So excited to talk about cellular health. We know this is really at the root of getting healthy. Like if our cells are not well, then we can't get healthy. Do you want
Right.
to drop in there? Like, can you talk to us about cells,
Yeah.
cellular health, cell
Yeah.
membranes, and why that's so important?
I love it. I just had a coach just ask me because I'm training a whole new group of coaches. And I do remember back when I was training you. It's so cool though. Like now you see, right now that you've done the program yourself, you've understood it more, how to actually speak about it. But I had a coach literally ask me this question, like, what exactly fixed the cell to get well? Like, I don't quite understand. Right. And I told her, I said, just picture a cell, right? If we can get the bad out, and the good in, right? We're made of billions of cells. Doesn't it make sense that, you know, we're going to feel better at the end of the day, right? If those biological processes that happen at a cellular level, which make us up as human beings, right? We're meant to detoxify. We're meant to tap into fat stores naturally, burn ketones naturally, all of these things that ultimately God put in our bodies for survival, right? It's funny to like think about that now. Times of survival, like we don't necessarily have those, but if you think about it, that's why obesity and chronic illness and diabetes and all of these things are happening today because we aren't tapping into these abilities that the body has, survival abilities that ultimately keep us young. They keep us thriving as humans, right? Survival of the fittest. Those that are tapping into those survival mechanisms in the body, ketosis as an example, fasting as an example. It's that's the conversation in these longevity podcasts that we're hearing. I'm sure you speak a lot about longevity and anti-aging and all of those things, but ultimately we're not tapping into those things. And so getting back to the cell is being able to improve those cellular processes at a cellular level that ultimately keeps us as humans healthy and improves our longevity over time. So what we're doing with our clients, Lauren and I, is we're helping clients get to the health of their cells, whether or not that is the cell membrane, reestablishing a healthy cell membrane. Our cell membranes are made up of what, Lauren? Fat, right? And so we need to support our cell membranes with healthy fat. And for years, unfortunately, we've been told that fat is bad. How can fat be bad, right? Our
People
cells
still believe it. People still come into the program and they're like, I'm trying to reduce my fats. I'm like, why?
like, huh? You mean, well, actually, right? It's this reframing. It's a different conversation. It's, well, what fats do we need to take out of our diet and what fats are we adding back in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we call I'd like to actually, if we can go into the 5 R's, that maybe is where maybe we want to start if we want to talk about the health of the
I
cell.
definitely want to talk about 5 R's. Yes, for sure. Because I think people are probably already wondering, like, how do I get the cell healthy? And I think that's always the first
Yeah.
question I get in sessions. And when people say, like, oh, I've been taking so many supplements, I don't feel any different. But the question is,
Right.
where are the nutrients getting into your cell? So
Yeah.
yeah, take it
Right.
away.
So we take all these supplements, right? We do all of these detoxes, we do all of these juice fasts, we sauna, we cold plunge. But how do we ultimately know that we're actually getting these nutrients into the cell and getting the bad out, right? And it all starts with this roadmap that, as Lauren said, my father is Dr. Pompa, and I am so proud to be his daughter and to have now stepped into this role of teaching this process that he now is teaching and has been teaching for many years. And just to paint a little picture for you guys, my father got very sick about 30 years ago. He literally was on his deathbed, basically. And God gave him this roadmap of the 5 R's of how to essentially fix the cell. And it all starts with R1, which is remove the source. Lauren and I are going to dive deeper into what sources means, what's some example of those sources. I'm sure she already has, given that her father's a biological dentist. So I'm sure you guys have discussed some of these sources of inflammation, but always getting to the root cause of what is driving this inflammation at the cell. Because ultimately, if you look at a cell, if you are just bombarded with inflammation, you're going to blunt receptors. You are going to make it impossible for those supplements that you're taking to actually get into the cell to actually use it, because those pathways aren't working properly. And then be able to remove what we like to call cellular debris, or, the toxic stuff from the cell, right? So we ultimately want to remove the source of this driving inflammation. And this can take years, guys, months, years, right? My father always likes to say it's never months, it's years of this process, right? And R2
is a lifestyle too, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not just trying to do a protocol and then go back to our old ways. That's not
exactly
the goal here.
Right. And I think that's the big thing that makes us different, Lauren and I, in terms of what process we teach our clients, is day one, we're reframing in their minds. This is not a quick pill fix. This is going to be challenging the body to become stronger and tapping into literally these survival mechanisms that ultimately heal the body. Right. So it's cool. R2 is regenerating the cell membrane. I talked a little bit already about that. The health of the cell, life and death literally starts at the cell membrane. Literally, if the cell membrane is not functioning properly, as I've said, in and out, you are not going to have a healthy cell. So we really do focus on diet, supplementation of certain fats that help to replace and regenerate that cell membrane. R3, Lauren, you want to say it?
Reestablishing methylation. Is that 3 or 4?
That's 5. Yeah.
That's 5. I always talk about them out of order.
I know. I don't
sure.
It's hard because our product, right? The product line is R3, R5.
Yeah. Reduce inflammation.
Yep. That's R4. And R3 is the mitochondria, right? So reestablishing energy at the cell. And this goes down to, right, the mitochondria of the cell. So we all understand, all of us took biology at some point in our lives, but literally getting to the basics of, what produces the energy at the cellular level for these biological pathways to actually function, for detox to function, for protein synthesis to function. It all happens at the mitochondria. The mitochondria produce what we call the energy dinero, the money of the cell, right? The ability for the cell to actually function is ATP. And this all happens in the mitochondria. But unfortunately, when you can't get the bad out and you have a lot of these toxins that are just bombarding the cell, it disrupts the mitochondria. And so this is where we're seeing people with chronic fatigue, chronic illness, people that can't get out of bed in the morning. They just don't feel well all of the time. Right? Brain fog. But ultimately, I just have no energy. If you are one of those people, I just have no energy. Well, the first thing I think of is R3. We need to fix the cellular, ATP, right? We need to reestablish cellular energy. And how do we do that? It's honestly, it's the R5 pathway. It's getting to the source of inflammation, and it's also getting the cell healthy so that those mitochondria can regenerate. Fasting is another way to actually produce more mitochondria at the cell. So, and R4, as you said, reduce inflammation. Dr. Pompa and I are, what we always taught from day one when we first, were teaching the 5 R's was we reduce inflammation through diet. That's like typically the first thing. But what's the first thing you do, Lauren, with clients, right? We change the diet, make a shift, right? We find out what are they eating in their diet that we could potentially change. Even if someone comes to us with, they're eating perfect carnivore, grass-fed, organic, regenerative, right? 100% the way we eat, right? But they're starving themselves, right? We add carbs back in. So one of the first things we do in our program is we teach clients how to reduce inflammation through diet. But we now have a part of our product line, which is really powerful, where we actually, what we've done is on a regenerative organic farm out in Nashville, we grow mushrooms on a certain substrate. So let me give you an example, turkey tail, right? Turkey tail has this incredible ability, the technology to actually target the gut and the brain cells in the body, right? They're using turkey tail in cancer research. to
Mm-hmm.
ultimately get these drugs to get into the cell and affect the cell in a much more powerful way. And so we've utilized this technology essentially, right, where we've grown, let's say, turkey tail on turmeric. And we all know turmeric has anti-inflammatory properties, right? We're able to get those properties into the mycelium of the turkey tail and actually put it in a capsule with herbs that also drive certain pathways and adaptogens that push certain pathways to become stronger as well. And so my father did develop an R4 product to actually target cellular inflammation. So this is the first time in Dr. Pompa history that we actually have a product to target R4 and support that pathway, but now we do. And right away, Lauren, people start taking that product. You've seen it and they're like, I feel so good, right?
I love that in the second call, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm sleeping better. I have more energy. My gut's
Yeah.
working. And that's just the beginning. But I think it's so interesting. It's really twofold with the nutraceuticals of removing the source. We can do that through lifestyle, but then also the bioavailability of these supplements. Because a lot of people come in with 30 supplements. They're like, I've been taking these. I'm already taking these. I'm like, you're not taking these.
Right.
You're not taking
Right.
these very bioavailable nutrients that we've made.
Yeah. And I think that's the importance of the technology is that, it does make those nutrients more bioavailable because we can actually get it into the cell, right? Bioavailability means how much the body can actually utilize. A lot of us take supplements that just honestly go in and out, right? So if you can increase the bioavailability through fermentation processes and some of these technologies using mushrooms, you're going to get a lot more bang from your buck. But we're not a supplement program. And that's ultimately what we want to teach you is combined with just the support, we're teaching clients how to actually remove the root cause of why they're so sick. So, and ultimately, all of the R's help to R5 reestablish methylation. And I think R5 is one of the most important to have like a deeper discussion around because methylation is this biological process in the body that allows epigenetics to be a thing, right? To actually turn genes on and off. Our genes are not our destiny, right? So you've heard the myth that, well, your mother had thyroid issues, so it makes sense that you do. There's nothing you can do. False identity. False identity. Cut that out of your life. I pray that out of your life right now. That's not true. Right? We have the ability through methylation, if methylation is healthy and working properly, which in most people it's not, unfortunately, we have the ability to turn off those genes and turn on the right ones, right? And so reestablishing healthy methylation through a healthy cell is ultimately how we can do that. And we've seen it. Lauren and I have seen clients come into or out of, or in remission for some of these chronic diseases that doctors were like, you could never heal from. And the 5R pathway is how we were able to ultimately, it's not us, it's empowering these clients' bodies to do what they're intended to do.
And the methylation especially is so exciting when I tell people about that supplement and I tell them it's going to help genetic expression. They go, oh my gosh, I need that. I'm like, yeah, we all need that.
I have MTHFR, right?
Yeah.
So have you talked about MTHFR in your podcast before?
We definitely talked about methylations. We've talked about different genetic SNPs. And I just think there's so much that we don't know. Like there's a lot of research on just a few key MTHFR SNPs, but that's only a piece of like something that's so much larger. So I think what's very awesome in the program is we actually kind of assume that you have methylation issues, most people, because we have such a toxic environment. And environment is pulling the trigger on a lot of these genes. So like most people need to reestablish with those cofactors. So like the B vitamins, the magnesium, zinc, there's so many other pieces to that.
Yeah, it's so true. I was just at a stem cell event in this past weekend, and one of the teachers, he said it perfectly. He said, if you have MTHFR, because someone asked the question, why have MTHFR? I can't methylate.
Oh, it's
just because
such a narrative.
Right. It's such a narrative. It's a false identity. Just because you have the MTHFR gene turned on, it doesn't mean you can't methylate. It means you may not be able to methylate as well as someone else, right?
Not at full capacity, but it's not zero, and it's still not given.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, pretty powerful discussion there, but
yeah. So much to dig into with the R's. I think I want to circle back to removing the source, because we know we can start dumping nutrients and improving nutrition, but that alone is not going to do it. We have to take away the source. So can we talk about some of the biggest sources of stress and toxicity?
Oh my gosh, I love this question.
Like,
We
where
could
do we start? There's so many.
talk hours. Well, I'll start with perfect storm. Let's talk about why we would even have this conversation about sources and what sources even means. I touched a little bit on it, but let me paint a picture for you guys, right? If you have a stream, right? Think of like an up to down stream flowing from, the top of a mountain to the bottom of a pond, right? And at the bottom of this pond, there are a ton of fish, right? And unfortunately, they find out that these fish are just dying, right? And they can't seem to figure it out. They bring all of these scientists, clinics, naturopathic doctors, all these supplements and saunas and cold plunges. These fish just can't get well. I'm making a joke, but I'm serious.
Yeah, they're doing all the biohacking, but it's just
doing all
not
the biohacking,
clicking.
methylene blue, you know it. And sometimes these fish get better for a period of time. They come, into periods where their symptoms get better, but then they just back to it, right? They just keep dying. And 20 years later, they find a factory at the top of the river dumping mercury, just consistently mercury into this river. Well, duh, if we can remove the source of where this mercury is coming from, sure enough, these fish get better and they live, right? So that is ultimately, that factory at the top of the river is what Lauren and I are speaking about when we're talking about a source of a toxin, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's talk about three of the most common today sources that we are finding and seeing in very chronically ill clients. It's heavy metals, it's biotoxins. What's the third one? Heavy metals.
Stress.
And stress. Yeah.
But stress is a big category, right? Because it's emotional, right. It's physical, it's chemical.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll say the third one, that we see a lot of is hidden infection, right? Mm-hmm. So hidden infection is a huge one. And Lauren can attest to this one. I'll let her speak more on this one in the dentistry component, but hidden infection is huge. But heavy metals is, especially in my generation, with vaccines, just tons of vaccines, right? If you were, a 60s or 70s baby, your vaccine schedule was it was this much, right? Mine Tiny. Was huge. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I was 6 years old, my parents passed away when I was 7 to a murder-suicide. But prior to that actually happening, only 6 months prior to my parents passing away, my twin brother, Dylan, he was put on the spectrum after a series of vaccines. Mm-hmm. And these vaccines are just loaded with thimerosal, so mercury. And a lot of research shows us that these injections go into our body. It's called an adjunct, right? That's why they use heavy metals in vaccines, so that the immune system wakes up. Oh, there's a toxin in my body. I need to go after these viruses, these attenuated viruses. And they build this immune response against these viruses, right? And that is the idea behind a vaccine. But these adjuncts are extremely, extremely neurotoxic. Neurotoxic meaning toxic to the brain, toxic to the neurology. And so I remember we got home from the doctor and I was sitting on the couch, Lauren, and I looked at my brother and his face just changed. He wasn't Dylan anymore. I remember that day. God allowed me to that day. And so you can tell I'm pretty passionate about that. But unfortunately, my generation and generations in the past have been exposed to a lot of amalgam silver fillings, right? So amalgam fillings are those silver teeth, right? Those silver cappings on teeth. And it's amalgam literally stands for mixture, but it's actually about 51% mercury. So they really should be called mercury fillings by definition, but they're not, right? Mm-hmm. Sure, Lauren spoke about this a lot, but going back to that factory, amalgam fillings are a factory for continuous exposure right to the brain of mercury, right? And it's funny, like if you kiss your spouse, like you're exposing them to mercury. It's funny, when I met my ex-boyfriend, he had amalgams in his mouth. And my dad, when he first met him, he almost fell to the floor. He's like, "You're not kissing my daughter."
Oh, wow. That's just another level. But yeah, but conventional dentists are taught that this is safe. It's safe in the mouth. But it's not safe when you take it out, but it's safe in the mouth, which is kind of
Makes no sense.
related. Yeah.
But so my mother actually was my biological mother. She was a dentist. So she, you know, she went to dental school. She was exposed to dental offices. Some of the sickest clients that Lauren and I work with are dentists because of mercury, right?
A
And
lot of brain
so
fog.
yeah, exactly. So you can imagine one of my large sources, because it's passed from mother to baby in the womb, heavy metals are just like, you know, you hear tuna's bad because it's high in mercury. Why? Because it bioaccumulates. Heavy metals bioaccumulate in animals. That's the thing. Same with humans, right? If you think about that, why is tuna, you're told when you're pregnant not to eat tuna. Why? Because tuna is just loaded with heavy metals because it bioaccumulates from mother to baby.
Yeah. And gets stored in your brain, which is not where we want it.
Exactly. So same with babies. So I was passed a ton of mercury. My second large source, I'm just painting a picture for you by giving you my example, was I had severe mold exposures in college, as well as when I was a baby. We were living in Florida. So mold is it's one of the sources that people don't talk about, right? But Lauren, you know, if you're, you know, you may be learning a mold protocol online, right? But you're still in a moldy home. Is the home the source? Yes, right? You need to actually get out of the source. You're in the source of mold, right? I used to get clients that, you know, they'd be like, well, can I just do the mold protocol? I can't leave my home. I'm like, you can, but it's not going to help you.
No, because mold overactivates the immune system, right? We go into fight or flight, and you can't really detox if your body is stuck in that stress.
Yeah. Talk about one of the worst sources to shut down all pathways at the cellular level. It's mold. It's biotoxins, right?
And it's
So
everywhere.
yeah, it's everywhere, unfortunately. Even I live in Arizona. And when I moved here, it was funny. I moved here because I lived in Puerto Rico and I was trying to run away from the mold. My immune system just couldn't handle low levels of it because I was so sensitive. And when I moved here, I actually found out that people that are super sensitive to biotoxin illness, they do worse in Arizona. Want to know why? Because of the monsoons. It rains so much here during certain seasons and it floods the deserts and stuff. And then mold spores grow. And then when it dries, and then these things called haboobs, it's basically a sandstorm, you know, blows across the valley. And people that are sensitive to these mold spores, they're super sensitive to dust. So my body's doing a lot better now because I've gotten out of the sources. But I am pretty sensitive to the dust here in Arizona, which is kind of crazy. But so biotoxins, big one, right? And a lot of times, I'd like to give your listeners a quick little hint here, but a lot of times the mold that's making you sick is the mold you can't find in your home. It's hidden somewhere.
You can't see it. You can't smell it.
Yeah. And by the way, a lot of mold you can't smell because your body, you know, you've been there, you've been living there long enough. And it doesn't just have to be your home. It could be your workplace. It could be your car, right? And we don't say these things to scare you. We say them because it's that real and it happens, right?
Yeah, I have a client that's been sick. You know, a lot of people were sick through the holidays, which is a whole other topic. But one client hasn't gotten better and she's on the nutraceuticals and she's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting sick from the supplements. I'm like, we got to do a little more digging. She found a huge mold source at her workplace.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, the answer is not always so clear, but like there's probably a source somewhere. So we got to look, we got to open our eyes. We got to keep looking, got to ask questions, you know, like this.
Yeah. What was it that you asked her that helped you identify it? Like,
I think it was in our second call, just talking about sources as a possibility. And then her gears just kind of kept spinning. And she was like, oh, I really don't feel well at work. I feel okay at home, but I don't feel well at work. So that's something to pay attention to. She wasn't seeing it or smelling it, but she just noticed she didn't feel well.
I think that's
she already wasn't feeling well, but she was feeling even worse there.
Yeah. The question is, right, I used to ask clients this, you know, how do you feel when you're away from that place, right? How do you feel? I feel better. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. We need to dive into this. That's like the biggest question to know if you're living in a moldy home, if you leave for a period of time and feel better, right? The other thing too is you'll hear clients say, well, when I'm at work, I just don't feel good, but it's work, you know, or, you know, my brain fog is just so severe, but it's just work. I think I'm just miserable to be there. But you'd be surprised how many commercial buildings are just loaded with mold.
Yeah, terrible. Yeah. And then you add in the EMFs and being on a device and blue light and the stress of work. And then, there's
I don't even have my blue light
storm.
glasses on right now. Good reminder.
I
And then
know.
and then
Go
the
ahead.
third, right, is the big one that is commonly missed is infection, hidden infection. And this is where Lauren, I'm sure, and her sister have delved so deep into this topic with biological dentistry, but root canals and wisdom teeth being removed improperly. There's a long list of things that can contribute to these hidden infections in the jaw, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, you've also got, Lyme disease. You've got other viruses and bacteria and parasites that unfortunately they may be sources of why someone's so sick, but they can't beat these pathogens because they could have this hiding place like a cavitation in their jaw, right? They
Mm-hmm.
can't beat these pathogens because they're hiding around heavy metals and biofilms. So a lot of times pathogens are one of the last things we like to work on with clients because we like to get the body healthier with detox first, or get the gut a little bit strengthened first too. It's kind of interesting. A lot of programs are doing it wrong because they're saying, no, we have to fix the gut first. Fixing the gut first is the key. Meanwhile, they've got a mouthful of amalgam fillings in their mouth, right?
Yeah. They still have a ton of toxic exposure. So the body's under threat.
Meanwhile, they're still living in a moldy home. How are you
Mm-hmm.
going to fix the gut if you've got a constant exposure in your mouth? It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make any sense,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And you may not be symptomatic with these underlying infections, especially in the mouth. A lot of people don't feel things, which is scary. And it's hard to then motivate a client to do so. But
That's
we
right.
know that this is a very big possibility because we see it
Yeah.
all the time. People getting better once they address the dental.
It's so true. Yeah. I mean, that was a big part of my story was I had wisdom teeth coming in so impacted that they became severely infected. But because I knew what I knew about pulling wisdom teeth out, but I didn't know enough at the time. I was very early in my journey with cavitations and understanding it. I refused to get my teeth pulled. I was like, heck no. God gave me those for a reason. I'm keeping them in my mouth, right? But the pain was severe. I started, experiencing chronic yeast infections. I mean, chronic. So much so that, like I would pray for my period because it would like flush me out, and it would be the first time that I felt normal
Oh, wow.
for my period. And I didn't like my period. Okay.
Sure.
And
But
it
if
was,
that's the better option, like that's saying something.
but I realized, what it was. One day I was like feeling around because it hurt so bad. And this is kind of gross, but I pulled out my finger and it like smelled really bad.
Hmm.
And I was like, huh. I was like, if there's dysbiosis here, there's dysbiosis
Everywhere.
somewhere else. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I clicked, and it was by the grace of God. I mean, my dad had just met Dr. Scott Chandler in Utah, and I was his first Pompa patient.
Oh, no
And
way. I didn't know
yep,
that.
we went in at like a couple months later for, to go see what was going on and what we needed to do. And Chandler was like, Olivia, these teeth are severely infected, severely. Like he was like, and my Dutch test was showing me, breast cancer in 20 years. I mean, it was bad. I was in a really bad space, and healthiest I ever, seriously, healthiest, I wouldn't say healthiest I ever was, but the largest change in my health that I have ever felt in my life was once I got those out.
Wow.
Like I've never had a yeast infection since, and I'm 28 years old. That was 6 years ago.
That's huge. It's huge. Yeah. This is not talked about enough because we've been taught that the mouth is separate from the body, which is just absolutely insane. It is so intimately connected. It's crazy.
It is. It's crazy.
I want to ask you about bucket theory because questions that I hear, not necessarily in Pompa program, but people will say, well, if mold is bad or infection is bad or mercury is bad, why does it make everyone sick? Right. And like if the body's resilient, we should be able to detoxify these things. Why does it make one person really sick and maybe someone else can handle it?
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to give a perfect example, and that's husband wife, right? You could have husband wife living in a home, and wife is just riddled with chronic illness. Husband feels nothing. We all know. I know listeners are like, yeah, that's me at home. That's me and my husband, or me and my boyfriend, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I'm the crazy one. I feel sick. And he's like, what's wrong with you? Or vice versa.
Yeah. And honestly, it's torn relationships apart. Seriously. I've seen it happen where, husband thinks wife's crazy and they don't last. Seriously, because of this, health issue, right? That this wife is dealing with. But ultimately we have to look at it from a different perspective, that we are bio individuals. We are all so different. What affects you, Lauren, is going to affect me so differently. We're all human. We're not, cut in stone. We're not made exactly the same. And that's the beauty of being human, right? But to Lauren's point, everyone picture a bucket, right? And this bucket fills up over time with chemical, physical, emotional stress. We talk about the word stress, but define it. It's not just, well, I'm stressed at work, right? Chemical, physical, emotional stress. If there is trauma or stress on the body can't tell the difference, which is interesting. If anyone's read the book Biology of Belief, Bruce Lipton talks about just thoughts and how they equally disrupt the cell membrane, equally disrupt the cell, just as a physical or chemical meaning a heavy metal, whatever. Heavy metals would be an example. Biotoxins would be an example of a chemical trauma or stress on the body. The body doesn't know the difference, right? But over time, starting even before you were born, in the womb, you are filling that bucket up. And some people, just their buckets are filled faster than others. I think one of the one stressors that isn't talked about enough is emotional trauma, right? I mean, my emotional trauma from when I was 7 years old, watching my parents pass away in front of me in a very scary way, my bucket was already full by the time I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not, most people will go, well, you obviously seem okay. Like you're fine. Right. But subconsciously, your body doesn't always, it takes longer, right, for those things to heal. And I'm still in counseling, still in EMDR, and doing these things to help my body process those emotions and those triggers differently, because the emotional trauma is just as important to tap into and help the body heal from, and how the body responds to those triggers just as much as a physical, right? So how fast those buckets fill, and childhood trauma is something that fills buckets up very quickly, and people don't talk about that.
Yeah, we know trauma actually increases inflammation in the body. There's studies showing like CRP goes up from emotions, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. So chemical, physical, emotional trauma. So and that's why Lauren and I, when we analyze client histories, we look at timelines. Like, what did your parents do for a living? Right? We have parents that, like, my mom was a dentist. So I got a lot of mercury from mom. My bucket was so full before I was 7 years old. It's crazy. So you have these couples where, one couple may have experienced a ton. And, I've got farmers and husbands that their occupations were toxicity based, occupations, and they're still thriving, still feeling fine. I wouldn't even say thriving. A lot of men aren't truly in tune with their bodies. And by the time they actually start detoxing because their wives are forcing them to, they go, yeah, wow, I've never felt this way in my entire life.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how actually sick I was, right? Yeah. I think women are more in tune with their bodies in that way too.
Yeah, a little bit. I think the passing on from your mother or your parents is so important. I have a client that had cancer at 3 years old, and you go, well, oh, you didn't choose these toxic exposures. That was passed on. And we can't remove that source. Of course, it's so far back in time, but we can improve the pathways, and then detox alone, just cellular detox, systemic detox is so helpful. Do you want to jump into how we even begin to look at detox and how it really differs from?
Yes. Oh, I almost hate the word detox, but
I know, but
before I do, I want to talk about like basics, like foundation of like foundational healing stuff. I mean, kids today, the rising numbers of autism and chronic illness, diabetes, cancer in kids, it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. But it's, yes, it's all of the toxic exposures, not to blame mom and dad, but truly that it is part of it. But it's also these kids, they're being birthed into this toxic world where they're bombarded with vaccines. They're bombarded with just constant exposures, and the body just can't keep up. Not to mention that just the basic healing essentials that every human needs, we avoid. Sunlight, lathering babies in sunscreen. Are we insane? Like, have we lost the foundations of being a human? Yes, we have. Literally grounding kids, right?
The best nutrients, they're outside.
Getting them dirty. No, I don't want my kids dirty. There's too many germs outside. That's how you build an immune system.
Yeah.
Immune deficient kids is how cancer starts.
Mm, scary.
So it's like going back to just the basics, we're missing a lot of it. Right. And so, and, here's the other thing is, if you are listening and you're like, well, I'm screwed. You're not. Right. There's
Mhm.
something that Lauren was hinting at, which is detox. And detox in our space, meaning the Pompa space, is very unique. It is real detox. You can use the word detox. Sometimes, even yesterday, I was like in the sauna, and my friend who doesn't understand what I do, I said, yeah, I just felt like I needed a detox today. Meanwhile, I'm actually on a detox cycle, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But, real detox is at the cell. It's at the cellular level. And how do we do this? We use chelators. We use specific binders that sit in the gut and capture these toxins. But it's done in a way that honors the half-life of chelators. It's done in a way that really it's an art and a science. It's different for everyone. That's why actually going through the program and learning the process and how to do it yourself is really powerful. But there's a lot of detoxes out there like IV chelation that we don't agree with. There's a way to do it properly. But IV chelation is not good at the end of the day. Why? Because it breaks the number one rule of detox, which is honoring half-lives of chelators. Right.
Just an example, you would go to a practitioner, they're going to give you a high dose IV one time, send you home.
Send you home. Yeah. Those toxins have been pulled because you've added a high dose of a chelator. And at that point, you either feel really good or really bad. Right. You go home going, wow, that worked. I just detoxed. Right. Meanwhile, those toxins are just going to redistribute and be somewhere else in your body. I had a client that just signed up with me, and he did IV chelation for 1 year, and he felt really good at first. Like seriously, like his symptoms were improved, all those things, but he went from having severe brain fog from mold illness and heavy metal toxicity to major gut issues. Can you think about why? Right? It's like he's pulling
Just
all the
dumping and
it's
not
just dumping into
clearing.
the gut, but it's not clearing out of the gut. And all of a sudden he's got this gut riddled with heavy metals and biotoxins.
Oh
We
gosh.
call that literally
Scary.
redistribution, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the perfect case of IV chelation that made someone more sick. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to be very careful. And that's why in our program, we teach our clients the process so that they understand it, so that they can go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Why I would do that. Right.
Yeah.
And follow, there's a lot of rules with detox that we follow. And everything is taught to a T.
Yeah, the clients always want to know, well, how much do I take? I'm like, no, we're starting with the rules, because if you understand us, then you become the detox master. And it
Yeah.
really is an art, because everyone responds differently. That's like a big question. How am I going to feel? What symptoms am I going to have? And we can't predict that because you're a bio individual. But if
Right.
we teach you that symptoms are not bad, they're just communication from the body. And if we can listen to that communication and make adjustments, then like we create a masterpiece in a way with detox.
I love that. Like in our program, like, we'll have usually the first month when we're prepping the body with some of these healthy supplements that empower certain pathways. It just opens detox pathways, really. We're not a supplement program, but we're doing this in combination with other things, right, to empower real detox, which takes time. But most people feel great. They're like, oh, Lauren, I feel so good. For the first time I've slept in years, right? Then they start detoxing, right? And we're pulling toxins, right? And usually in the body phase, where it's that first time they've real detoxed in their entire life, right? Following these rules, they go, oh yeah, I don't feel good. I'm quitting. This isn't progress. I'm getting worse. No, your body's telling you that something's happening,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Symptoms can be good. They can also be bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? The body like, I'll give an example. Getting sick, right? Getting a virus and you don't feel well. There's a fever. Most people would take a Tylenol, right? They would
Shut it
feed
down, turn it off.
chicken soup, right? Eat. You need to eat. You need to eat. When the body's really telling you when you have a flu, rest, don't eat, remove
Mm-hmm.
food. That energy diversion needs to occur at that
Mm-hmm.
point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we do the opposite, but shut down the fever. We need to bring the fever down. No, the fever is an innate ability for the body to kill and go after pathogens, but also to build up that immune system for later exposures, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little upgrade to the system, though not always comfortable. And detox is not always comfortable, but it's also not meant to knock you down, right? We kind of
Right.
have to find that threshold where we are moving. And like anything is to be expected. Like I got really kind of irritable and cranky when I was detoxing.
Me too.
We can mitigate that and improve pathways, but yeah, it's not always a linear process in that way. So what does
Yeah,
that journey kind of look
body's
like?
going to communicate. Yeah. And then I want to say something else, right? Because I know people listening are probably like, well, I actually kind of want to do their program, but now I don't because they're saying it feels horrible. Not everyone feels bad. A lot of people start body phase and maybe the first couple days are like, yeah, wow, I need to cut my dose. I don't feel good. But boom, they're like, whoa, this is the first time I've felt no brain fog, right? We see breakthroughs very early on in detox, especially when we move them into the brain phase. And brain phase is all about tapping into the deep rooted toxins in the brain, really. But that takes years. It's years of brain phase, not months.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, where we see people out of Hashimoto's remission. Or in remission, sorry. I always mess that up, that terminology, but we see huge breakthroughs in brain phase.
Yeah.
And people feel really good. Like I remember body phase for me was really difficult. Like I didn't feel good. And when I moved into the brain phase, it was like all of a sudden I was like, whoa, I've never felt this good in my life. I felt like I was in school, like studying. And it was the first time I didn't have brain fog. And all my friends in college were like taking Adderalls, like to study. And I was popping brain phases because I felt so good. Yeah. It was amazing.
Chelators are the way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So what about like the overall timeline? You said years, not months. Like we're really creating a lifestyle. We're teaching you how to detox. And of course, it looks different for everyone. Maybe in 5 months, which is the official length of our program. And we have continuing support, of course. But how do we kind of understand how long this process could take? And how do we listen to the body to know when that may change or end?
Yeah. It's such a unique, timeline for each and every individual. But I will say on average, people that have a lot of symptoms or even just one or two symptoms that you're like, yeah, this really needs to improve. It depends on your history too, but I would say it's about 2 years of brain phases. It really is. So it's years. That's why we say it's years, not months. I think if someone came to me, Lauren, that was very healthy and they didn't really have symptoms, they just wanted to be as healthy as they could. They understood that, chronic exposure to toxins is daily in America. Mm-hmm. You really don't matter how hard, like me, I live a very non-toxic lifestyle. I still can't avoid them. Right. Mm-hmm. I live in an apartment complex and I can sometimes smell my neighbor's laundry detergent. Right.
Oh,
it's like,
wow.
It's like there just is going to be exposures. It's like, but they want to learn the detox process to optimize. I would say 6 months of brain phase consistent for them is going to be really good. And then maintenance thereafter. Maintenance for most people, instead of doing a detox twice a month, it's maybe once every couple of months. And then you're going to have periods like me. I've detoxed for years and I've taken a couple of years off where maybe I've done 5, 6 a year. And now I'm back in this place where I'm back doing it all the time because I just need it. Right. So I think that's the beauty of learning the process, is being able to come back to it when you need to. But I would say on average, most people need to detox pretty consistently for the first couple of years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then last thing I wanted to touch on is, we were kind of talking about this at the start, is just meeting the client where they're at. So for some people, this could seem kind of overwhelming. We have a lot of resources. It's kind of endless things that you can dig into and add to your life, but we're really about meeting you where you're at and just starting slow with sustainable changes more than anything else. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Oh, it's so amazing. Like I just love giving examples because I think it just shows the impact that like small change can make. We had a client that, she worked for us actually. And so she did the program because I think her head trainer was like, you need to do the program. Like, you obviously have all these symptoms, like get started. She's like, okay, get started on the program, meets with the coach on the first day and tells her, I'm not changing my diet. I'll do the detox, but I'm not changing my diet. And I have to shout her out, Christian. She's incredible. She is actually one of our head trainers. And she said, okay, fine. We don't have to change your diet. We can get started on the detox and source removal, right? I'll meet you where you're at. But can we just change one thing? Just change what you put in your coffee every day. That's it. And just by changing what she put in her coffee, she lost weight. And this woman
Wow.
saw change just enough that inspired her. I'm sure the detox was part of that as well, but still, it was enough for her to see progress, the body shifting, the body changing, for her to go, oh, yeah, I want to do more. This is great. Right.
Mhm.
And so I say that because sometimes when clients come to us, we don't change their whole diet. We don't shift their whole life because it's just too much, right? And also, when you apply too many stressors on the human body, when they're in fight or flight already and not feeling well, the body's going to go, heck no, leave me alone. I'm going to be more symptomatic, right? So
Mhm.
you really
Mhm.
do have to meet each client where they're at in their healing journey, because everyone's different,
Mhm.
right? Someone
Yeah.
like me, I could do a 5-day water fast tomorrow and have no problem. Someone that has never fasted before should never jump into a 5-day water fast, right? We would
No.
start with very small diet change, getting them to remove grain and sugar, then maybe over time getting them into keto, then maybe pushing for a 16-hour water fast, right? It's like you have to baby step these things. And um, it is a marathon, not a sprint, when it comes to meeting these clients where they're at, because ultimately the body has to adapt to these stressors. The body has to adapt to these changes. If the body isn't adapting, it's only going to make them more sick.
Mhm. I think also reframing that some diets that people have tried in the past, perhaps like carnivore or keto, are going to work better when we remove source and get the cells healthier. I hear
Amen.
all
It's
the
so
time,
true.
like, oh, keto didn't work for me. I'm like, well, are you willing to reset and try it another way? Because
Yeah.
it might go better this time.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think the other thing in our wellness space, in this biohacking, right? I mean, it's literally the name in your podcast title, right? It's like, in the biohacking space, the mistake that we're making today is we're going into ketosis and carnivore, and it's working for us, right? For the first couple of months, the body's like, heck yeah, I lost 20 pounds, no brain fog, I feel great, best shape of my life, my symptoms are gone. This is the diet for me. And they're in keto
And
carnivore
then,
for 2+ years. And you can literally look at people in a biohacking room. Let's say you're at a seminar. You can pick out the people that their body is in complete catabolic mode, complete catabolic mode. And they're
hmm
actually starting to burn muscle and eat muscle. And they're
hmm
starting to get skinny fat. That's what we call it, skinny fat, where they're actually putting on fat because their body's starting to protect their stored body fat, because they're literally starving, and they're
hmm
burning muscle. What we need to really be doing is teaching diet variation, which is the ability to go in and out of feast and famine, in and out of anabolic versus catabolic. The bodybuilders are doing it, right? You've heard of like feasting or carb loading before a competition, right?
hmm
Where, they actually get leaner because they've been in such catabolic mode for a moment. They go and feast right before the competition, and their body goes, oh, I'm not starving. I can let go of that stored body fat, and they get
Oh,
more ripped
brilliant.
for competition, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's this ability to go in and out. And so in our space, longevity people love catabolic, but it really needs to be a good, healthy mix of both. And we teach that in our program.
Yes. And it's so good for women too that just have been taught over time, like restrict, restrict, restrict. And it just
Right.
backfires over and over again. So
It's so
there's
true.
so much more we could dig into with nutrition.
I
But I want
know.
you to share like overview about the program if someone is interested. Like, where do we go? How do we get started?
Yeah. So I'm sure Lauren will post her link. But yes, I would always recommend just, following a link that Lauren will provide. Start by listening to my father teach on the cell, right? We touched on it a little bit today, but he goes deeper into it by actually drawing a cell. My dad is literally known for drawing this cell and literally explaining cellular health and sources and inflammation and the 5 R's. And just start by listening to the webinar. We want you guys to understand why you would even do something like our program before entering our program, right? And that's the beauty of coaching. It's not a treatment program, it's a coaching program. We're going to coach you in these processes so that you can become your own doctor, essentially, right? And ultimately get to the reasons of why you haven't felt well. So just start there. At the end of the webinar, you'll be prompted to schedule with our health advisor team. And then once you kind of go through the onboarding process, you'll be assigned to a health coach. I actually train the health coaches, as Lauren kind of hinted at in the beginning. So I'm very passionate literally went to chiropractic school, and I'm a chiropractor that doesn't use my hands. I train health coaches for a living, and it is become my passion because I believe it's how we can reach millions of people, and it's how we are reaching millions of people. But that's how to get started. Just use Lauren's link, and I'll see you guys on the other side.
Awesome. You're such a wonderful teacher. And it's just, I've been learning from you for almost a year now, and I continue to learn. It's so great. So thank you
That's
so
awesome.
much. Can I ask you one last question? If you could give our audience a piece of advice, something they could do today to optimize overall health, cellular health, anything that comes to mind.
Oh, that's so hard. Good seed oils. I would say that's,
Yeah.
I feel like people in our space know it, but they're not actively doing it.
Mm.
I'll send you another link, Lauren, to my seed oil card. And it's a card that describes what oils to avoid in restaurants and what you can swap it for. And it's literally reading it off the card to the waiter, and you'll get used to saying it. And I would say that's number one. Get the bad oils. And not all seed oils are bad, by the way, guys. That's a common myth in our space as well. Seed oils are actually packed with omega 6s, and omega 6s are one of the most powerful components of the cell membrane. Mm-hmm. So like omega 6 is not bad for you, right? It's rancid omega 6. It's denatured omega 6 that is bad, right? And so we need to change that too. But what I like, the seed oil cards say rancid seed oils, just FYI. But I would say the number one thing is getting these vegetable oils, canola oils, safflower, sunflower, cottonseed, soy, get them out of your diet, because they're only driving inflammation at the cell membrane. And one dose of it lasts in your body for over 200 days.
So scary.
That's insane. So I would say the number one thing, remember, the life and deaths of the cell starts at the cell membrane. I would say the big thing is diet, your oils that you're eating. And I'm not saying don't ever eat out. I eat out at least probably twice, maybe 3 times a week, but I eat at restaurants that don't use seed oils. So
yeah, powerful. Thank you so much. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So lovely chatting with you, and
so fun.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, of course. Bye, guys.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Okay, I think how do I stop